Welcome to the draft ranking series. It's draft season, so now it's time to rank who is the best of the best. I'm here in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, as I talk about the linebackers of this class, which is one of the weaker positions we have. But there is pure talent near the top of the list, so stay tuned as I try to uncover who's going to work out in the league. If you're new, subscribe to the channel as I'm doing every single positional group. But for now, I'm Chase Keller, and welcome to the top 10 linebackers of the 2024 NFL Draft. Enjoy. While this class is pretty weak, I still do have 3 honorable mentions as they almost made this list. Those linebackers are Mississippi State's Nathaniel Watson, Kentucky's Trevin Wallace, and UTEP's Tyrese Knight. So those are 11 to 13, but we got a top 10 list to go through, so let's get started. I will have no face cam for the rest of this video. You can see the glares up at the top of the screen. They're a little annoying. I don't want y'all to deal with that, so no face cam today. But the number 10 spot on this list is a guy who has the same grade as 11 to 13. Texas linebacker Jalen Ford ends up sneaking onto this list. The 2-year starter has a lot of intriguing and good traits. There's just one pretty big thing that I don't like at all. Let's start with what I enjoyed on film. I think Ford's coverage instincts are very good as he's got a clear understanding of offenses and is able to maneuver around in his zone towards receivers. And while this is a huge thing, I think Ford brings more appease in the run game. He's really good at containing the rusher, taking away the outside option with his good speed and giving his D-line more chances. And especially with how good that Texas D-line was, they played some great run defense. Along with that, he's got solid gap control on the inside and he's able to jump off blocks to make tackles. So Ford is really good in the run and provides a lot in the pass as well. But as I said, the concerns make me worried. He is pretty dang inconsistent overall. I think there's 2 inconsistencies that need to be noted, beginning with his block deconstruction. Some plays he is able to rip off blocks and look unfazed, and on others he gets held up and taken out of the play. The second inconsistency is him jumping gaps and rushing his gap. Some plays it's great, but on others he looks way too impatient and jumps through a gap too early. All of his concerns combined take him away from being a Mike linebacker in the NFL. So Ford's concerns bring him back, but the positives are still enough to bring him to 10th on this list. Ford gets a C+ grade, translating to an early 5th round grade and a 62 overall. As we move into the 9th spot, I'm pretty low on this guy compared to consensus, and that's Ohio State linebacker Tommy Eichenberg. Once seen as a top 50 player in this class and a potential 1st round pick, he's fallen backwards and I can definitely see why. In a class full of athletic linebackers, Eichenberg does not win in that category. He doesn't possess great explosiveness in anticipation, can't chase down receivers in the open field, and struggles to move laterally, which leads to iffy block deconstruction even without facing good hand technique. Along with these athletic concerns, he doesn't have any elite traits on the positives end of things. But the positives are still there, as you would expect in a guy who's number 9 on this list. Even if Eichenberg isn't the most athletic linebacker, he's great at making up for that athleticism in other spots. Eichenberg's positives start in zone coverage just like Ford. He's got a good feel for his zone and can interrupt passing lanes with his awareness. Even in that coverage, he's got active feet that might not be quick, but with bad explosiveness, he's still able to get off quick with that footwork. He also always gives full effort, and there were so many second effort plays on tape that I enjoyed watching. I know a few teams are really going to want that. Finally, he has great gap control at its best, but it can be inconsistent at some times. So Eichenberg 100% has some good traits, and where he can make up for his athleticism, he really does. Eichenberg receives a C grade, which is a late 4th round grade and a 63 overall player. And right after Eichenberg, we have a guy that I am higher on than most people. Of the 2 Notre Dame linebackers, most prefer Mers Liufau. I actually prefer J.D. Bertrand. The fifth-year senior really shows his experience in the run game, and I think he'll go higher than most think. First off, Bertrand is a relentless effort player who will not give up until the whistle. Even when he misses gaps, he won't stop going for the tackle, but he barely misses those anyways. He has great gap control and can jump off blocks fairly easily. Even if he can't, his nice play strength at attack point allows for him to get the advantage physically. He also provides good explosiveness, above average for the NFL, but average in this class itself. Finally, he takes on very nice angles in pursuit and doesn't get behind the ball carrier often. Bertrand has many traits that teams really want to see in a linebacker, but unfortunately, he does have those weaknesses. And it's mainly with his athleticism. His below average speed takes away upside, especially as a blitzer. He also will commit to fakes way too often in the pass game, whether it be pass fakes or play action plays where he just goes to the running back. He also is wildly inconsistent at deconstructing blocks, just like Ford. Some plays he is able to rip off blocks, and on others, he gets held up and taken out of the play. So Bertrand has the traits taking away, but his good amount of positives should draw teams in right away. He gets the same grade as Eichenberg, a C grade, late 4th round talent, 63 overall. Number 7 on this list is actually the first linebacker I watched from this class, that being North Carolina's Cedric Gray. Gray brings on one of the very intriguing skill sets that include a very high amount of strengths, but also a concerning amount of weaknesses. Beginning with those strengths, he's a high-producing UNC product who gives teams hell with his explosiveness. He's got a fast trigger with great lateral ability to be able to throw his body around when in pursuit. Speaking of, he's got a very good downhill nature who takes solid angles on running backs in the run game. And while he has coverage concerns, he still adds in the pass, being a great blitzer who shows very high IQ when rushing on a delayed blitz. As a result, I think he will absolutely thrive in a blitz-heavy offense. So Gray's pure amount of positives might make him a top 3 linebacker off the board. But yes, the negatives are absolutely there. And that begins with his play strength. He brings on a very athletic skill set but lacks the power to be effective as a block deconstructor and an inside blitzer in forefront schemes. He also can commit to a gap too hard in the run, jumping into the gap without realizing where the back is actually going. He also does have coverage concerns out of zone, and his anticipation is mediocre and he needs to work on pulling that trigger sooner. Finally, he does have iffy gap control altogether in the run. Gray's skill set is going to be very fun to monitor in the NFL, and even if he's number 7 on this list, he's got very high upside. He receives a C grade just like the last two, but he's a 64 overall, mid-4th round talent. I have back-to-back prospects who I like in this class more than most, and that begins at number 6 with Mizzou linebacker Tyron Hopper. Hopper is a guy who has a concerning ratio of strengths to weaknesses, but those strengths are very, very strong. Hopper is one of the best run defending linebackers in this class, having fantastic gap control and patience when pulling the trigger. He really just works very well at the line of scrimmage, as he also adds on great QB spy ability, that being some of the best work I've ever watched, and he's able to make great delayed blitzes in pass rush. He also has the arm length that gives upside, as he can jump away and make good body control tackles. And on top of all of these, he's got the relentless effort to not give up on a play. As I said before, the weaknesses are absolutely there, which does bring along concerns. And it begins in the coverage game, as where he's a great run defender, he's not so good as a pass defender. His zone coverage ability is limited, as he doesn't have the field vision or awareness to work well in his bubble. And his all-around athleticism is pretty under average, which takes away upside as a man coverage defender. He also just doesn't bring great block deconstruction, as when facing great hand technique, his average play strength won't give him help. He also doesn't have great tackling technique and might miss more tackles in the league. Hopper's positives are super good, some of his negatives are super bad, but I think he'll do pretty well in the league. He is the first C+ in this video, being an early 4th round talent and a 65 overall player. The second straight prospect that I am higher on than your usual is Penn State linebacker Curtis Jacobs. He is pretty similar to Hopper. The strength to weakness ratio might be a little concerning, but the positives are really good. Jacobs is a high IQ linebacker who gives potential in all three aspects. As a run defender, he has good gap control and can jump off blocks to make tackles well. That tackling technique is also just very solid. In pass coverage, he's got fantastic anticipation in zone coverage, and that trigger is pretty solid as well. He also can dive and bend well to make awkward tackles if working on a receiver in the open field. And in pass rush, he has the lateral ability to avoid blocks athletically and burst to the edge quickly. Having good traits everywhere is absolutely a positive in itself and should raise Jacobs' stock. But there are also scattered weaknesses in his game. Hear me out. His block deconstruction is really bad. He doesn't provide the best play strength, and leaving good hand technique is not a specialty. In coverage, he does have a tendency to lose the ball in the air. While turning your back to the ball isn't awful in itself, it happens too much to the point where he loses track of the ball and loses his awareness. Finally, he can play too hesitant and weak and get knocked off balance. The top 4 linebackers are pretty solid, so I would say linebacker 5 is not too shabby for this Penn State product. He gets a C+ as well, but he's a late 3rd round talent and a 66 overall jumping into day 2. These top 4 prospects all fall as B graded players, but we start at a B-. This is an extremely bold take, so hear me out very quick. Texas A&M linebacker Edgerrin Cooper is my linebacker 4 in this class, which is way down from his linebacker 1 consensus spot. I'm going to start here with why I'm fairly lower on him. First off, Cooper's frame does not fit that of a prototypical linebacker, with his 6'2" height being in the 55th percentile, but his 230-pound weight being in the 15th percentile. He's also a super inconsistent tackler, as he missed 12.8% of his tackles in 2023, which is fine, but just getting to make the tackle and the technique used are both wildly inconsistent. Alongside that, his zone coverage instincts could use some work, and he needs to develop a better, more confident feel in his zone. But this guy is still number 4 on my linebacker list, and isn't detrimentally far from number 1. So here's why people see him as the best linebacker. Cooper is a super explosive athlete who has phenomenal deep speed at his position, as he can chase down ball carriers at high rates. As a result, he does have elite pursuit and takes on some great angles in his tackles. He also brings a lot of blitzing upside with his nice pass rush production in college and his good initial strike that can knock blockers backwards, especially tight ends and running backs. Finally, he has some very good arm length to bring upside as an NFL run defender. So I can understand why Cooper is sought out as the number 1 linebacker in this class, but he ends up number 4 on my list. He receives a B- grade, translating to a mid-3rd round talent and a 67 overall player. And you might wonder who my number 1 linebacker actually is when I reveal that the consensus number 2 NC State's Peyton Wilson is number 3 on my list. So no consensus number 1 or 2 make my top 2. Wilson has his upside in different spots, but I just think that there's too much to consider him higher than these next 2. Wilson is a super explosive athlete who provides some of the best straight line speed you can ask for in this position. He uses that elite athleticism and burst to be a super good blitzer, which shows in his great tag of 15 career sacks. He also gives full effort until the echo of the whistle, but he is really smart with that and never goes past the whistle. I tagged him as one of the smartest players in this linebacker class. Finally, he has great lateral ability to add into his athletic skill set and make him a great option all around. Yes, there are a good chunk of negatives with Wilson, and I'm sure you're waiting for them to hear how I don't have him or Cooper at number 1. Well, it's mainly because of his mediocre play strength. He often will get pushed back on upfield blocks, and he doesn't have the leg drive to maintain it. He also struggles with block deconstruction and has to rely on lateral ability to get around blocks. He also plays too upright, especially when rushing the passer, and he does not have any elite traits outside of his athleticism and blitzing ability. Wilson is a pretty good linebacker. I just have him 2 guys higher than him in my rankings. He receives a B grade, which is a late second round nod, and a 69 overall. Moving into the second slot, this race wasn't the tightest thing ever, but it's still fairly close. I must have something for Clemson linebackers. Trenton Simpson was my number 1 last year, Barrett Carter is my early number 1 for 2025, and Jeremiah Trotter Jr. is my number 2 this year. Trotter Jr. honestly shocked me a little bit, but he does remind me a lot of Simpson, so it's not too crazy. I say that because he's a very explosive linebacker who can make wonders in several places. He's a relentless effort player with fantastic lateral ability and body control that gives him the ability to stop plays quickly. He provides value in all 3 aspects. He plays good man coverage because of his athleticism, he's quick to recognize the run and pull the trigger for it, and he has high blitzing upside because he can interrupt so quickly. He also does a good job as a contained outside linebacker, giving him alignment versatility. So a lot of positives really everywhere for Trotter Jr., so where does he really lose? Well, those weaknesses are scattered as well. Trotter Jr. has a very concerning frame at 6 foot 228 pounds, being smaller and more lean than your average linebacker. His arm length is also a concern and won't provide him with much range. In pursuit, he takes some bad angles, often getting wrapped up behind the ball carrier, and will miss tackles as a result. He also has issues with block deconstruction due to his average play strength. Finally, he does tend to get pushed out of the play too often with his okay balance. Trotter Jr. is another Clemson linebacker that shows to be a guy who will translate to the NFL. He also gets a B grade and a late second round nod, but he is 70 overall compared to Wilson's 69. And finally, the number 1 linebacker in the 2024 NFL Draft is none other than Michigan linebacker Junior Colson. I loved what I saw in his playoff run, so there was already hype surrounding him. His film absolutely backed it up for me. Colson comes off as one of the best run defenders I've ever watched at any position. He's an elite tackler with a fantastic wrap-up technique and a collegiate missed tackle rate of 6.2% on 162 tackles. He's got fantastic gap control and can jump off blocks very easily, and a solid length backs that up for the NFL. He also has very good explosiveness, which combines very well with his great play strength. He also is a very strong hitter and might force a lot of fumbles in the league, even if he didn't force a single one in college. Finally, he's a gritty player who played through 2023 with an injury, and he seemingly is all recovered from it. So the negatives are present in his game and they may look concerning, but it's not enough to get him away from number 1. But yeah, they are present. He tends to drift a lot in zone coverage and leaves the short pass open way too easily. He can also get a little grabby in man coverage, and honestly, I just don't think he's a pass coverage threat at the next level. He does also get off balance a little too much for comfort, especially when facing upfield blocks. He also can commit too hard to fakes sometimes, whether that be for play action passes or pass fakes. Overall, Colson is my linebacker 1 because he provides so much in the run and has upside to grow even more. He's a B+ player, being graded at a mid-second round talent and a 72 overall. So, those are my top 10 linebackers in the 2024 NFL Draft. Do you agree with my list? What is your top 10? Let me know in the comments section below. Wait, are you not subscribed yet? Well, do it now. I release content like this all the time and would really appreciate your support. I'm Chase Keller from Chase Keller Journalism, and I will see you all next time.